like they're like, wow, I like really want to talk about this right now. If not, we can just jump in with the first one. Okay, so I don't hear anything, so I'll say, well, let's start with the first one. How does the recent legislation regarding Dreamers parallel with the Biden administration immigration agenda thus far? Also on that note, is there anyone, okay, Jonathan, I see that you're gonna type for our breakout room notes, so we're good on that front.
Yeah, I think a lot of the energy going into the Biden campaign and the sort of getting rid of Trump was that it was going to be a major benefit to immigrants. It was going to sort of undo all the damage that was done to both immigrants actually in the country and America's reputation as being welcoming for immigrants over the past 4 years. And as we're seeing now, it's more just rather than it being kind of overtly anti-immigrant, we've just kind of like swept it under the rug. Like we're not really talking about it anymore. We're still making moves to deport people. We're still making moves to send people out of the country when this is the only country they've ever known. It's just the same evil but under a different face. And the recent legislation shows that it's up to the city and the states at that level to make changes based on the needs of their own citizens. And we can't rely solely on whoever's in the White House to be enacting the sort of moral country that we want to see.
Definitely. And I feel like I always think about this one really crude meme where it's like they're like dropping bombs, but they're like, oh, the first lady dropped these, she's a woman of color. And I think about that kind of a lot, just not gonna lie, because it reminds me of like these like pretenses of like progressiveness and like not doing the same things Trump's doing, but it's the same thing just under the guise of like progressive, like with a rainbow flag kind of deal. That's how I keep framing it in my head. Does anyone have anything to add to that? If not, we'll keep going. So the next question is, discuss the intersectionality of racism that becomes evident in the conversations of protecting undocumented immigrants and their mistrust of the police. When I think of the police, I think of right now with the Asian women who were murdered. I know it's not all women, but they were targeted, and I think of some of the response to that was like more policing, which is to me like never a great, like if something happens because of this racism, I don't think more policing is the issue here. Is there anyone else who wants to comment on this? I know it's just kind of Jonathan's the only one who's spoken. Should I popcorn someone? Is that gonna? I want to hear from someone else. Sorry, Jonathan. I love hearing your thoughts, but that's okay. If you don't want to share, you can always put something in the chat for later. We can keep going to the next. Oh, do you want to say something?
I have a quick thought. I think the point that Erich made about Mayor Lightfoot's decisions about undocumented immigrants in Chicago, making sure that they cannot be their immigration status cannot be used against them unless it's like a particular immigration proceeding, to encourage them to cooperate with law enforcement to solve crimes or whatever the terminology is there. I think that's a really interesting angle to look at it from. The idea that these people, they're in your society, like whether you want them there or not, they are members of your community. They see things, they're affected by crime, and they have a role to play in keeping everybody safe. And so if your desire to make sure that everybody comes here legally is stronger than your the role that you believe safety should play in your community, then you're really not getting anywhere. So I don't know. I think this also links back to when the census was happening. There was a lot of worry that people who had immigration concerns weren't going to answer the census, and that was going to lead to a lot of bad redistricting and poor allocation of congressional funds. I know at least there was a lot of energy. I used to live in Houston. There was a lot of energy around getting our undocumented population in Houston to answer the census. I'm curious if there's anything similar in Chicago. I'm sure Loyola would have done like a lot as well, being like a university campus in the community.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. I think it's there's so many things they're doing to put a band-aid over the problem, but they're not coming to the root of the problem, you know? So it's like, how are we gonna get these people like a legal status here, but like treat them like humans, you know, and not just try to get around the whole situation by and I think it still creates a mistrust of the police because even though there's these policies in place, that mistrust doesn't go away that fast and that quickly. Like even though, oh, we'll protect you, it's like that mistrust is already deeply rooted from years of like mistreatment and just yeah, empty promises basically. And like we've seen with this new administration too, it's people are frustrated, and I think that the policies have to be more aggressive in terms of like attacking it from a systemic level and like seeing that this is something that we can't just keep putting a band-aid over. So I agree with what you said, Jonathan.
I just want to touch on what Shivani said because the other day I went to one of the vigils that somebody here in Chicago hosted, and they were talking about, you know, protection and how people in the community have to step up. And we've seen it like through social media where, you know, the attacks have been videotaped and you see some people sort of stepping in or you don't. So it was just really touching because the lady who was talking about specifically men, and just how, you know, like Shivani said, like the police, they can do what all they can, but really the root of the problem isn't like stay with them or personally with them. It's the people around who are starting all of this. So
Thanks for sharing, Joy Ray. I was really curious to hear about Mayor Lightfoot. Is that her name? Just wanted to make sure that I'm getting that right. Cause I think I'd seen something like very briefly, but like I want to see like if there's going to be, the policy sounds really good. Like it sounds like it have like a really genuine impact, but I want to see like after a while, like is this going to make a difference? Because I feel like with any kind of policy that is going to help undocumented people, like it usually peters out in a way that's like moderately helpful. Do you know what I mean? Um, so I'm glad like something's being done and that she's taking the steps to do this. But I just want to see like what's gonna like actually be the impact of this law versus the intention and like what it sounds like on paper. Because they're not
Yeah.
always the same thing.
Yeah, that's like what I'm concerned about too, is like sometimes with these policies, like they sound really good, but then it like just like fades out or like it's not as enforced anymore. And like once like maybe like immigration isn't at the forefront, like where people are like, oh, like they forget about it for a little bit, those little blips where the media doesn't cover it, you know. um I'm like kind of like afraid to see if like it's gonna, like you said, not be as effective, but hopefully, like you said, it's a step in the right direction, and it's, I think it's really good. And it just shows support, if anything, towards the immigrant community. It's just hopefully just continues to get reinforced. Like I guess it's also on us to continue to advocate, you know, and pressure our people in power.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anyone have any other thoughts on that before we move on to the next question? Or anything else they want to bring up to talk about? No? Okay. So the next question, do you think, oh, it's about immigration in Thailand now. What should the role of the government be in protecting immigrants seeking asylum? And I think we kind of touched upon that with Mayor Lightfoot, just talking about how our government can do things to show support. But then again, it's impact, like intent, all of those things. And then how can immigration be improved in Thailand? Does anyone have any thoughts? You know, when I think of Thailand right now, I think of the political strife that's happening with the coup, the lack of resources that are being, it's not a good situation. So I'm sure like people are trying to find resources to like just survive, to live day to day, versus the government protecting immigrants is not on their list of priorities right now, I doubt.
Not to turn every conversation back towards COVID, but it really just has just influenced absolutely everything that happens in the world around us. I think the first part of that question about the role of the government in handling immigration affairs and handling refugees and asylum seekers, there's a lot to be thought about with regards to distribution of the vaccine. And if you look at like the worldwide distribution efforts, there's a lot of countries that have just kind of ignored the refugee populations, or have no firm plan in place to be vaccinating those groups. And I think this does tie in a little bit back to the previous question where we were talking about overcoming years of mistrust and a lack of a sense of safety. So if refugees are coming into countries where they know they can't expect support from these governments just because of the politics of the region, there's a direct parallel to underprivileged minority communities that feel like they're being left behind during the COVID vaccination effort in the US as well. I think a core tenet of democracy and of government should be that we work for all people, but that seems to be the first thing that we let go of as soon as we have the opportunity to. Anytime there's a hard issue that comes up, we're taking care of the people with money, the people who look the right way or have the right last name. I'm kind of rambling a little bit here, but like those are just the thoughts that came up when I read that question.
All really good thoughts, Jonathan. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that this is kind of like off, not with that question, but I thought it was so important that you mentioned like the disparities in the vaccine distribution. And I think that's so apparent also like in the US with like immigrants specifically. I just think about like my dad just got the vaccine, but we went through the whole process of him getting it. And there's this whole internet database that the city of Chicago uses. And it was so hard to navigate. And I just think about the people who don't have the resources or supports to be able to navigate technology or like know how to, use that kind of databases or even call things like that. And I think there's just like huge disparities, and hopefully I know there's community organizations like Centro Romero that we work with that support immigrants to get those, to close that gap kind of. But I think that they definitely are facing a lot of disparities in terms of, especially with the pandemic. Yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, especially with when we first started rolling vaccines out. You could look at like just the beginning of like a lot of like European countries, United States were getting the vaccines first, and like everyone deserves to be vaccinated, not just like primarily white countries. That's what I thought about. But we're gonna close breakout room. But I will see you guys in a little bit. Thanks for participating, and I can't wait to hear more of your thoughts.